Durban, South Africa, gateway to the Kruger National Park and a fantastic setting for the 29th World Aerobatic Championship. 36 of the world's best unlimited class aerobatic pilots from 13 countries will be competing for the title of World Aerobatic Champion. The World Aerobatic Championships is organized every 2 years by the World Air Sports Federation, the FAI.
We have a sport that's developed in the last 60 years from some pretty basic aeroplanes that were strong enough to do the job but not very powerful, to the amazing kind of aerial racing cars that these guys fly now, with a rate of roll and a strength that's far greater than anything else that flies in light aviation. Typically during a program, during a sequence, these pilots will pull a positive G of 10 or 12 and push a negative G of maybe 8 or 10, maybe even more. Some of them can smile watching this and think perhaps it's even more. These are G-forces that are far higher than NASA astronauts, Formula One drivers. This is an extremely violent sport. And to sit in one of these little airplanes travelling at up to 220 miles an hour and in the top of the box in the 3,000 foot, 1,000 metre area at the top of our performance zone, coming to a complete standstill so the controls don't even work, with 300 odd horsepower engine is an extreme situation.
The pilots in this competition will all have proved themselves in regional and national competitions, competing through the various classes in the sport, and would have different levels of experience competing at international level. The great thing about aerobatics is that it's a great leveler. Military pilots and airline pilots can find themselves being outflown by private pilots.
A lot of people have asked me, what is aerobatics actually all about? Because to the outsider, it seems as if the aeroplanes are just aimlessly flying through the sky, flicking, rolling, looping, and nobody really understands how it all fits together.
Let's explore championship-style aerobatics. The history of competition aerobatics dates back to 1960, where the first World Championships were held in Czechoslovakia and have been held every 2 years since. Competition aerobatics was born out of many years of aircraft development and honing of flying skills that were first used to dodge the enemy during the wars. The first aerobatic type maneuvers would have been the spin, the loop, the roll and the stall turn. Over the years, these were combined and developed into the many figures that we see today. Leading Spanish competition pilot Jose Aresti standardized everything and developed a way to draw the maneuvers and the figures that pilots were flying, creating the Aresti catalog that contains the aerobatic maneuvers allowed in aerobatic competition. Each figure in the catalog is represented by lines, arrows and geometric shapes that can be flown. Competition aerobatics involves the pilots performing figures that are strung together in a sequence. The sequence can be a sequence that is published and which the pilot can practice, containing known figures, as well as an unknown sequence which the pilot cannot practice and will receive the day before. The sequence is performed inside an aerobatic box or performance zone, a virtual cube of air over the airfield, 1,000 meters long, 1,000 meters wide and 1,000 meters high, with lower and upper limits. The pilots perform their sequence inside this virtual box in front of a panel of judges who mark the performance of each figure out of 10. Each figure has a difficulty rating or K factor. Basically, if the pilot scores a 0 out of 10 for a really difficult figure, that will have a bigger impact on his score at the end. The pilot must consider positioning at all times to stay inside the box as he performs his sequence, and also has to contend with wind that can cause him to get positioning penalties by flying outside the box. So let's follow through with commentary as Marcio Oliveira flies through a figure of his known sequence.
Figure number 4, a double roll and pulled through to the bottom. Is slightly wobbly, but that might just be the turbulence up in the box there. It's a very hot day today. And 1.5 positive flick to inverted, but on a very, very, very steep line afterwards, and also very short. And I'm sure that that will be downgraded quite a lot. And he's pulling around for 3/4 roll one way and 1 1/4 the other way.
Now, of course, to do all of this requires an enormous amount of mental preparation. The physical flying the pilots have done for many years, and they are really good at this. But memorizing and psyching yourself up just before the flight is what really counts. So this is why the pilots mark this strange aerobatic box on the ground, and they walk their sequence inside this imaginary performance zone day after day after day until it's part of the muscle memory. What they are actually doing is they are trying to visualize where they would be after each figure. They're also trying to work out which figure would present best where in this performance zone. And believe you me, if you think that this is a game just of skill, it is much more a game of mental preparation.
The pilots are all from the unlimited category of pilots, which means they are the very best aerobatic pilots in the world who have committed to this hugely difficult sport, performing in front of a set of hand-picked international judges. What are judges looking for?
We watch for accuracy, geometric accuracy mostly. Radiuses and corners, lengths of lines, accuracy of rolls, verticals, 45 degrees. It's geometry. It's a geometry box in the sky. The real difficulty for the pilots is that it's easy for us on the ground to see exactly what they're doing. When you're sitting in the airplane, of course, you have no reference.
A game of two parts really. There's a very accurate and technical part from the cockpit where you can do very matter-of-fact things, fly angles, lines, etc. very cleanly and be able to measure them. But then the other part is a bit more subjective when we have the judges from the ground giving us a score on what they thought they saw.
It's still subjective. You know, one cannot take away from the human factor from there that what I see, the other just sees somewhat different.
A computerized scoring system allows for the subjectivity and balances the scores. Judges can also hold out on issuing a score until a television review can be done. As the competition begins, the judges are warmed up with a flight by the warm-up pilot, who marks the limits of the box to assist them in judging positioning and to identify the upper and lower limits. The chief judge also briefs the warm-up pilot to add mistakes into the figures flown to assess the judge's performance and make recommendations.
So only the director brief me?
Yes.
And then I do the mistake. So it's always some normally little mistake just to see if the judge can follow.
An international event of this nature cannot get started without an opening ceremony to kick it off. Traditional African dancers welcome the International Aerobatic Fraternity with open arms. The sounds of Africa form the backdrop to an enjoyable evening, allowing the pilots to enjoy the shared camaraderie that the sport is renowned for, before the action would kick off the next day. The main briefing took place to inform pilots about conditions, safety aspects and general aspects of the competition, as well as to determine the flying order of the first program, the free known sequence.
So first program is known, so the pilots practice it endlessly until they get to this event. And when we get here, then the pilots put together a series of for each nation the most difficult figures that they can possibly imagine that they may have practiced, and those groups of figures are then offered to all the pilots to make a sequence from them, maybe with some linking figures. 10 figures are chosen, and the sequences that they design can be up to 14 figures long, so we can have from 1 to 4 linking figures, and these are the real test.
At the start of the competition, and to ensure fairness, the pilots draw numbers for each flight they will do. This ensures no bias as the pilots become nameless to the judges. It's both quite an honor and quite daunting to be chosen to be flying first up in the World Championships. This honor was bestowed on Marcio Oliveira, fresh from being crowned as Brazilian national champion.
Number one!
With registrations and briefing complete, the flying order settled and the figures drawn for the first 2 unknown sequences, it was time for the action to get underway.
A standard as every year. It's a good briefing covering all the aspects. Good figures set for the next 2 unknown programs, so everything okay.
On day 1, the weather was fine as the judges arrived and prepared for the first flights of the day, with the French warm-up pilot Romain Fall and South African Lila Gonadek putting the judges through their paces.
Now, 1 square kilometre seems to be a very large playing field, but at speeds ranging from almost 0 to probably somewhere close to 350 kilometers an hour, depending on where the pilot is in his sequence, this thing could go by in a flash.
As the competition got started, pilots could finally apply all the training and preparation they put in the months leading up to the event. The free known sequence allows the pilots to get a confident start, flying practiced sequences and allowing them to assess the conditions. For some, this would be the first ever appearance on the world stage in unlimited aerobatics.
First competition in unlimited and in the world class, so I was not so lucky to be first, but I did the best job as I could.
Visibility is quite good. It's hot, of course. We're flying in midday at the moment, or just gone, 1:30, so yeah, it's pretty hot. But the box is well marked and a little bit of a tailwind today, so it's quite difficult to position how I would have liked.
I did, I think, a great start. I was inside my flight and so on.
Alexandre Orlovsky, who continued where he left off as the 2015 world champion in the last World Aerobatic Championship at Châteauroux in France.
And as per usual, aerobatics is full of surprises. One of the sort of dark horses was Castor Fantoba, and I'm standing in front of his aeroplane here, which is a Sukhoi 31. He'll be the one to watch when we fly Program 2, which is the first unknown, where we sort out the men from the boys. Watch this boy from Spain.
As the sun set on the first day at Malalan, the pilots retired to a stunning African sunset to chat about and reflect on a first day's flying. The pilots continued with Program 1 on day 2 and then started Program 2, the first unknown. The tension and concentration levels would certainly increase as the pilots flew their first unknown. The sequence only lasts around 4 minutes, and with heightened concentration, pilots enter a focused state, sometimes unable to recall specific details of the flight.
To be honest, generally speaking, if you can't remember the flight, after it's been completed, it was generally okay, and when I landed, the only thing I could remember was the tail slide, so yeah, I'm going to go with it was okay.
The vast experience of some pilots helped them deal with the tough, unknown sequences.
I feel better than 2 days ago, so I expect result a little bit better than for the first program. No, we'll see result. We'll see opinion of judges.
Aerobatics at this level is also a team sport, and the pilots flying can rely on the very helpful crit of their teammates on the ground. Sometimes when making a mistake during the flight, it is better not to try and fix it, as this immediately highlights the error to the judges.
But you held it, you didn't fix it, and over the top, obviously it fixed itself.
How are the points in the rolls?
Good.
Right there.
Yeah, no issues, no problem.
No flight ever goes exactly according to plan, so there were parts of it that I really liked. I liked the positioning. I thought my presentation was really good.
I was happy with the first flight. I felt really good after that. The second flight, not quite as happy. I could have done a few things a little bit better.
I did a 3/4 roll on the way down instead of a quarter, so please God, maybe the judges didn't see that.
The judges have asked for 5 television reviews. They will go into a conference room, and we've kept all the footage of every flight, and they will be reviewing figures for 5 pilots.
More positive.
Positive. I agree,
yeah.
positive. I missed it.
Positive. Yeah. Positive.
Can we go back a little bit? I just want to say it once more.
Cool. Well, after 2 hours in the television review room, the judges have made their decisions and the scores are out.
Once again, a great flight by Alexander Orlovsky, followed by consistent performances by Mikhail Mamistov and Francois Rallet. The team from France showing that their traditional dominance would once more be a feature.
Well, so far it is not even quite lunchtime yet, and already there has been a lot of drama. This morning we had a long delay, which meant that we could only start flying around 11 o'clock. To make matters worse, the wind changed and picked up. It got quite strong. So we had to move all the judges to the eastern side of the box so the pilots could fly into the wind. But it was a very, very difficult day.
One pilot who was able to fly was Patrick Davidson, who bravely battled the conditions.
Conditions a little bit tougher than I would have liked, to be honest. I struggled a bit with the performance, the density altitude being really, really high, and they changed the axis, I think, especially for me as well, which threw me a bit of a curveball. But all good, I'm happy with the flight. As I said, I'm here to do my best, and that's what I believe I've done so far.
The wind got stronger and stronger and stronger, and by lunchtime, the flight director called it a day and said no more flying for today. So all the pilots went off back to their lodge and are probably enjoying themselves by the pool. We'll catch you tomorrow. This morning, well, the wind is still from the south, which means we are going to be basically carrying on in the same direction as we did yesterday, and we're going to continue with program 3, which is the second unknown.
It's very hot here, so the altitude density is high, temperature is high, it's difficult to get acceleration.
The wind is always a factor, causing the sequence to drift and affecting the moods and therefore the positioning score of the judges.
Especially when the pilots are on top of you, it was very unpleasant yesterday after a lot of them flew, probably wind related, but overhead the judges.
The sequence must always be flown into wind, and the wind change means that the pilots must fly the sequence in a different direction. This affects the landmarks that the pilots use on the ground drastically.
We've been practicing all along the runway, yeah, and now suddenly, the clues change, and I can tell you today there's no horizon. So you're still looking for the horizon and, forgetting what's the next roll, where's the next stop,
The delays caused by wind and box changes meant rising tension, as extended waiting times on the ground allowed the opportunity for overthinking and mental psyching out. As aerobatics is a mental game, delays are bad news. The last 2 flights of Orlovsky and Mamistov would be closely watched.
How many of your pilots are in the top that still have to fly?
Just one. Just one pilot is remain to fly it, and this is the first one on the rank. This is Alexander Orlovsky, who is the first pilot at the moment. Then it's a lot of pressure for everybody, but he stay calm, and we hope he could. The problem of this sport is to be able to fly at the same conditions. I mean, weather condition. And when you fly in the morning, in the mist, or when there are a bit of not very good visibility, it's not the same if you fly late in the evening. Then they don't have the same chances.
The waiting game affected Orlovsky as he struggled to score high enough to maintain his grip on the lead.
I had to wait a lot of time between the program number 2 and number 3. 2 days, and I was postponed at each time. You have to stay focused, and we know when we are focused we lose energy. That's why I made a mistake on my program. The other figure was good, but it wasn't a technical problem, but I think a brain lock.
Mamistov produced another fantastic flight, the former two-time world champion showing his experience and keeping his head in difficult conditions.
Flight was good enough, it could be better, but visibility is not perfect, just sky and ground and nothing between, no horizon.
Rob Holland and Castor Fantoba was impressing with focused, accurate flying and arresting the French dominance of the previous flight.
Apart from the first figure, that would, the first figure is a little bit, you are entering the box, you are not the wind. I've made all the calculations properly of the wind, so the first figure is a little bit stressful. So passing the first figure, that was not, let's say, clean. The rest of the program, I think I've flown a serious program and hard, precise, so I'm happy with it.
The scoreboard told the tale. Rob Holland and Castor Fantoba with great flights, shifting the French down the leaderboard, with Orlovsky's mistake costing him dearly. Going into the final flight of the competition, the pressure would be on Mikhail Mamistov to produce a consistent flight. Would the experienced champion from Russia keep his head? Would Fantoba and Holland repeat their previous performance and upset the French dominance? The day's flying would unfold to tell the story.
Not so good, but not so bad. I think I should keep my rank.
Once more, the waiting and the wind would have an effect.
Today was also quite difficult to start first with changing wind condition and so on. But as we say, sometime we win, sometime we learn.
Mikhail, it's the end of the competition. Final flight. You've just landed. How did it go?
It was good enough, but not the best, not the worst, but I hope it was good enough. I had some problems in the flight with belts. I had, after took off, change my seat belts, and during the flight crosswind was strong enough, unexpected for me. It was much stronger than I expected, so I had some difficulties the flight, but I hope generally it was not bad.
It's been a long, hard competition. How do you feel now that it's completely finished?
Feeling is good. Yeah.
Mamistov's championship pedigree would be telling as the judges completed reviews of some flights and the scores became available, closing off a day of high drama, but a day that would see Mikhail Mamistov becoming the world aerobatic champion for the third time. With the traditional competition completed, the focus would shift to the freestyle. Rob Holland, the four-time freestyle winner, pulling out the stops once more. As the week-long event drew to a close, it was time to celebrate the victories and reflect on the winners and their world-class achievements. A competition that would be remembered for hot, dry, windy conditions. A close competition and a true test of the best, flying in Africa. This was the 29th FAI World Aerobatic Championship. Another story to be inserted in the book of this fantastic sport of aerobatics.